Whatever time you're watching this, welcome. My name is Sharon, and here at Bath Elim, we are continuing our teaching series looking at the miracles of Jesus as depicted in Mark's Gospel. So today we will be examining the miracle of the man who is healed from demon possession in Mark chapter 5. But really, before we focus in on the specifics of that miracle, let's take a few moments to briefly look at an overview of the book of Mark. As will come as no surprise, Mark was written by a gentleman called Mark, and his intent in writing is expressed clearly in chapter 1 and verse 1 of the book, where he says he is writing to present Jesus, the Son of God. Throughout the narrative of this book, Mark is thus aiming to demonstrate that Jesus is indeed the Son of God. He is the Messiah, the Saviour, the one sent from God to bring God's kingdom here on earth. Now, the Bible Project really helpfully highlights that the book of Mark is split into three fairly distinct sections. The first is chapters 1 to 8, which tells about Jesus and is based all in and around Galilee. And really the aim of this section is focusing on establishing who Jesus is, and really this claim that he is the Son of God. Towards the end of chapter 8 and through to chapter 10, we have the middle section. And this section depicts or tells about Jesus and his disciples travelling from Galilee towards Jerusalem. Now, as well as this physical journey happening, we get a kind of metaphorical journey and wrestling as the disciples really converse and discuss with Jesus who he is, what it means for Jesus to be the Son of God and Messiah. And we have this final sections of chapter 11 through to 16, and these are all set in Jerusalem. And they tell of Jesus, the Son of God, and how he is the Messiah, how he fulfilled that role. So with that overview in mind, we come to chapter 5 of Mark, and it's important to give a little bit of context to the narrative. Remember that Jesus and his disciples had had a really busy day of teaching and probably healing as well. Towards the end of the day, Jesus has suggested to his disciples that they come away from the crowds and that they go over to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. And it is on this journey towards the other side of the Sea of Galilee that a wild storm comes. And the disciples witness Jesus rebuking the wind and the waves to be still and quiet. So in a very short space of time, the disciples have witnessed Jesus' authority and power over disease in the physical realm. They have witnessed his authority and power over nature in the natural realm. And now they will see Jesus' authority in the spiritual realm with his complete power over all demons and evil spirits. So with that as an introduction, let's read together Mark 5 verses 1 to 20. And I'm going to be reading from the New International Version. They went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an evil spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him any more, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills he would cry out and cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Swear to God that you won't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you evil spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" He's saying, "What is your nature?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And just as a side here, remember that Palestine was under Roman occupation. The sight of the army, the Roman army, would have been commonplace. And a legion was a specific term within the Roman army to mean about 3,000 to 6,000 soldiers, a unit of soldiers. So this man says, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs, allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the evil spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man, and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your family, tell them how much the Lord has done for you, and how he had shown mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. There is so much that can be gleaned from this rich passage, but today we are simply going to focus on 3 responses and 3 requests to Jesus. So firstly, the response and request of the demons. Here we have transitioned from hearing about a wild storm at the end of chapter 4 to now reading about a truly wild man at the start of chapter 5. Now Mark, known for being a succinct and concise writer, here spends a number of verses really ramming home the message about how wild, untamable and tormented this man really was. The locals had tried to physically constrain him, but verse tells us that no one and nothing was strong enough to subdue him. But then Jesus. Aren't they the most beautiful 3 words? But then Jesus comes along, and in verse 7 it tells us that this man, under the influence of demons, ran and fell on his knees before Jesus. Now this single word in Greek for fell on his knees means to fall prostrate, to bow down. The 3 other specific occurrences of this word in the New Testament are all translated as worship. The demons' response to Jesus is to bow down before him. They recognise him immediately as the Son of God. They call him Jesus, Son of the Most High God. And we should not be surprised by this, for James 2 and verse 9 tell us that even the demons believe and shudder. Now, not only do these demons recognise who Jesus is, but what he came to do. They ask Jesus not to torture them, for they knew that Jesus had come to destroy the devil's work. Again, we read about this later on in the New Testament in 1 John 3 and 8. Now note that these demons do not merely pay lip service to the sovereignty of Jesus, but they know that they are truly under his power and authority. For their request comes in terms of begging Jesus not to send them out of the area. And just as an aside, this is an area that they were completely comfortable in. It is an area of desolation and isolation. It is an area of death. Remember, this man is wandering among the caves and graveyards. So they ask Jesus, "Do not send us out of this area," and they beg to be sent into a herd of pigs. They know that they can do nothing without Jesus' permission. Now Jesus grants them their request, and he sends them into a herd of around 2,000 pigs. These pigs then rush off the side of the hill and drown. Now to me, this just highlights the utter depravity and evil that this man was enslaved by. Indeed, an army of demons that had once sought to kill and destroy him now exert their destructive power on these pigs. And there is such a stark contrast here between the real purpose of the enemy, which has been exposed as death and destruction, compared to Jesus' concern for people to be brought to complete and utter freedom. This man that everyone else had ostracised, they had lost all hope in, has been remarkably transformed by Jesus. Jesus, who cared enough to come over to the other side of the Sea of Galilee to meet with him. No one is beyond God's love and power. So let's secondly look at the response and request from the onlookers. We read in verse 14 that the onlookers, those who were tending the pigs, rush off to tell everyone in the town and countryside. And when they come, they see the evidence of a man completely transformed. They have no doubt that a miracle has taken place. And their response is one of fear. They are afraid and awestruck. Now, I am not going to give the crowd a hard time for being awestruck and afraid. They have come face to face with the mighty power of the Son of God. And you know, it's the very same response that the disciples had the night before. Just after Jesus had calmed that wild storm, it says in Mark 4:41 that the disciples were terrified. A holy fear and reverence of the Lord had come upon them. So while I can understand and actually relate to their response, it is their request that is so painful to read. They plead with Jesus to leave their region. For them, it was too dangerous to have Jesus around. Their routine of life had been disturbed and they were uncomfortable. When the onlookers tell of what had happened to the man, the Bible makes it clear that they also made sure that they told everyone what had happened to the pigs also. Their possessions had been destroyed in the process. And you know, it seems that their material possessions ranked higher than the liberation and restoration of this enslaved, wretched, abandoned, unloved, unheard, and unhappy man. And instead of bringing the sick and needy from their area for healing and restoration, they plead with Jesus to leave and allow them to return to life as normal, life with despair, life with demons, life with disease. I am deeply challenged by this. It is easy to heap condemnation and indignation towards the people of this region. How dare they choose comfort, what they know, possessions, over celebrating transformation? Yet how do I react when discomfort comes at my door? How do I respond to the needy and those branded as hopeless in society? What is my response when discomfort and my possessions are called upon to reach the lost? To reach those in the tightest of chains? I fear that I too often ask Jesus to leave. Not physically leave, but do I block out the promptings that he puts on my heart? Do I choose comfort over compassion? Do I choose what I know and what is safe over stepping out boldly into the unknown in the solid hope of seeing Jesus' transformative power in another? I am deeply challenged. Finally, we come to the response and the request of this man who has been set free. This man's response is simply to sit, fully dressed and in his right mind. Jesus has done it all. Now, just as the demons beg Jesus and the onlookers plead with Jesus, so this man also comes to Jesus with a request. Verse 18 tells us that he begs Jesus to allow him to go with Jesus and his disciples. But Jesus denies him this request. He has granted the request of the demons to go into the pigs. He has granted the request of the onlookers to leave the region. But this man's desire he does not permit. Why? Do you know it's for such a good reason? This man is going to be called as the first ever missionary. Jesus tells him to go home to his family, to tell them how much the Lord has done for him, how he has been shown mercy. He is the first person commissioned to proclaim Jesus. Up until now, Jesus has asked people not to give testimony, not to tell of what he has done, because of the large crowds, because of the religious leaders hindering his movement. But in this scene, it is impossible for Jesus to stay. So he commissions this man to testify to his goodness and mercy. This man is a living testimony of God's power, a living, walking, talking demonstration of the love and power of Jesus Christ, Son of God. And you know, this passage right at the end tells us that his response to Jesus' request was that he did indeed begin to tell in Decapolis how much Jesus had done. He didn't just tell his family, he went into Decapolis and shared the good news. And the people were amazed. Now, the Decapolis were 10 Greek cities that were largely independent from Rome, although for those who know Roman history, you won't be surprised to hear that they were still liable for taxation to Rome and also had to send their young men for military service. But largely they had independent government and had formed an alliance for protection and increased trade opportunities. And these 10 cities also were largely populated by Gentiles. And so this is the first sign that the message of Jesus was bursting beyond the Jews and going into all the world. And you know, it's beautiful. In Matthew, the book of Matthew, we read about the fruits of this man. It says in Matthew that large crowds followed Jesus. And you know, included in that crowd were many from Decapolis. This man's testimony, declaration of who Jesus is and what he had done will have led many, many more to being transformed by the power and love of Jesus. Oh, that my response to Jesus would be the same as this unnamed and radically changed man. What a rich and deep narrative. And as we come to a close, I just want to leave you with a simple and yet profound question. What is your response to Jesus? God bless.